Well, thank you. Thanks very much for the invitation. It's really my pleasure to talk to some colleagues there in Iran. And first of all, I would like to thank Mehran and Dr. Habibi for their kind invitation. It's really an honor to be part of this seminar, and hopefully we're going to find some areas that are interesting in terms of the things that I've done as an industrial engineer. And then moving on throughout the years of my career, hopefully this webinar and the material that I prepared for you will inspire you in terms of the things that you might be currently doing. There might be some good alignments there, and the future of industrial engineering there in Iran as well. So as I said, I was reading a few things about your university, and I think this potential, and I use the quotation marks there, the potential role of industrial engineering or of industrial engineers in the sustainability of society. And potential because obviously this is an option. I mean, as engineers, just like any other professional, we can choose where we will focus. But I found that it's interesting as part of the aims of your university. The third aim talks about a strong sense of public responsibility, and that's kind of related to the sustainability of society, right? I'll be referring to what I mean by sustainability, and that speaks to not only the environmental aspects of sustainability, but also the social and economic dimensions. And at least to me, that's related to the public responsibility that we potentially have. Some of us take that responsibility, take that role. Some others choose maybe to address it more indirectly. But I think there is a good alignment between this work and what the university is aiming there for students to achieve in terms of education. Brief agenda of the presentation today, a little bit around my background as an engineer, and then the studies that I have pursued and the work that I have done. Then we will talk about sustainability, and in particular about the Sustainable Development Goals, which I don't know how popular or they are in Iran, but I'll show you a couple of slides on that. And then we will focus on my research. On my research trying to contribute to sustainability in general and some of those SDGs in particular. And I hope that that research, even though now as an academic and not necessarily as a pure industrial engineer myself, will make some sort of connection with the things that you are doing or aiming to achieve. And then at the end, hopefully, we're going to have some time for discussion. If you have any questions in between my slides, I understand you could throw them in the chat, raise your hand. The idea is to have an informal conversation more than a formal presentation, where we could interact between us and share some ideas here. All right. So a little bit about my background. I did industrial engineering at the University of Santiago in Chile. That's where I'm originally from. And industrial engineering in Chile, it's a very popular degree, a very popular program. This university in particular has around 170 years of age, and industrial engineering started there about 100 years ago, when in the country we still had a few industries where we needed, traditional industrial engineering in terms of processes, technology development, etc. However, throughout the years, the economy and the development of the country shifted in different directions, and local industry, which we see here as part of this, this is the symbol of the Faculty of Engineering, where we see mining and several other industries as important for the country. Even though mining is still the main income of the country, actually we say that COPA is the salary of the country. However, most of the people will not work in the mines, either because they are too far away, etc. Most of the people will do services. And at the end, industrial engineers, they have shifted from a traditional pure engineering background focus into more management engineering, which is a mixture of selling business with a very good and strong scientific background in terms of a lot of math, calculus, algebra, thermodynamics, physics, etc., etc. So it's a mixture of both, and that means that my colleagues are working in different fields. They might be working as production managers or VPs or production areas in some places. Some others are certainly working as part of the mining industry or manufacturing industry, but some others are working in the public sector, NGOs, banks. I remember one of them, a good friend of mine. He was general manager of Hoyts, a cinema, international cinema chain. So we're doing many different things as part of industrial engineering in Chile, and that's because the first half, this is a 6-year degree. The first 3 years are a lot of basic sciences and traditional industrial engineering, and the second half is much more management related, and that speaks to the market where we were going to work. So it's the program has had to adapt throughout the years according to the local reality. So I did that during the 90s. However, towards the end of my program, I started focusing on more environmental engineering and trying to provide coming up with some solutions to environmental problems based on my industrial engineering experience. And I focused a little bit on waste management for a while back then. And that's how I ended up doing my Master's of Engineering in Natural Resources. Back then, by the beginning of 2000s, I went to New Zealand, and I did my Master's there at Lincoln University. And that was in terms of waste management, using artificial neural networks. So somehow I got this more modern industrial engineering techniques, if you could call them that way, using artificial neural networks to address the issue of waste management in Chile in particular. And then many years after, I did my PhD in social and ecological sustainability at the Faculty of Environment at the University of Waterloo here in Canada. And there I focus, and I'm going to show you some research specifically for my PhD, but in particular, I was working around organizations partnering for the sustainability of cities, particular cities that I work with around the world. So that's my education and my educational background. In terms of work, some of the things that I've done, which have been a few, and some of them, as you can see here, are much more related to my traditional engineering, industrial engineering background, as lead analyst for CSAV, which is a shipping company based back then in Chile, but nowadays part of Hapag-Lloyd, which is an international shipping company. And that was pretty much working in supply chain and global shipping. Then a supply chain manager, which are pretty much traditional works for industrial engineers in Chile. And I will say all over Latin America, because industrial engineering is very famous all over the place in Latin America, especially in places such as Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, and Chile. So then I was supply chain manager, again, working with warehousing and storage and all that for a dairy company. And then I became operations manager for a company in particular that was working with other large companies in terms of managing their waste and other resources, doing a bit of circular economy and all that. And then again, operations manager. So that was a very traditional industrial engineering background. Then I became projects manager. In particular, I was focusing on environmental project management. That was far south in the Chilean Patagonia, which is way at the end of South America, by the Magellan Strait, close to Antarctica almost. And I was working with the oil and gas sector there. In particular, I was in charge of leading from the project management perspective a service that we were providing to the national oil company, and they were bioremediating contaminated sites. about 1,000 contaminated sites over a huge area of land, and we were using bioremediation techniques to clean those sites. So then I got engaged into environmental issues and a bit of social, because obviously there were people somehow related to those contaminated sites. Then I went north into the country in Chile. I don't know if you know, Chile is a long and narrow country, so in the north it's very dry, and the desert is there, the Atacama Desert, and then in the south it's much wetter and greener. So then I became director of Environmental Technological Center with Fundación Chile, which is an innovation and technological innovation organization in Chile, and I was leading an environmental technology center in terms of energy efficiency, coexistence between different industries, the mining sector and for example tourism and the agricultural sector. So somehow all of them were fighting for the resources of those territories, and that was a challenge. Obviously, the mining sector was winning that fight, but agriculture, which was basically small farmers, they needed to survive as well, and tourism was in between, trying to develop, trying to grow, to progress, but they were having the impact, especially on the mining and energy sector there as well because of local pollution. So my role was bringing environmental innovations to the region in order to improve their development. So back then, environmental and social and economic issues were much more closely tied in terms of the things that I was doing. That led me to Nestle, the Swiss multinational, and with them I was sustainability specialist, and I was particularly focused on the three dimensions: the economic, the environmental, and the social dimensions in terms of the impacts and contributions that the company was doing to the territories. And then before I did my PhD, I was head of research and development at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development for Chile. And there we worked with about 200 multinationals, in particular some SMEs, but mostly multinationals operating in Chile in terms of their relationships with different stakeholders, the communities, their employees, the environment, civil society, government, etc. And that was related to the things that they did. If there were a mining company, they sure had issues with water and some other environmental issues and local communities. If they were in the energy sector, it was something similar. But they could have been a bank, and a bank at the same time, they will have some social environmental issues to address in terms of their investments in, for example, some polluting industries, or in terms of the way that they related with their customers, which was another social issue there. So that gave me a very broad understanding of the sustainability issues of different industries. I also collaborated with the government in terms of corporate social responsibility initiatives and a sustainability agenda for the country. And then I came to Canada. I did my PhD here, and now I'm assistant professor at Athabasca University Faculty of Business. And my teaching areas are business ethics, corporate governance, and corporate social responsibility. I also teach applied research, which is sort of a side topic, and my research agenda is basically organizations and sustainability in general, with certain emphasis, some focuses on some areas, which is a few things that I will show you now. So as a summary, as an industrial engineer, I've been working on different fields, and this shows you the variety of things that we could do as industrial engineers, right? As I said, supply chain and some other areas, and working with resources, etc. Some particular industries such as mining or agro-industry might be much more traditional for industrial engineers. But then again, we could do research and development. We could work with or for the government or civil society. We could do advocacy. That's one of the things that we're capable of doing, addressing social environmental projects, which is related to the impact of our own activities and decisions that we make as industrial engineers. Certainly collaborating with others. We have many skills, but there are many skills that we don't have, and we need to collaborate and work in teams in order to address especially complex and significant challenges that we're all facing everywhere in every country at a different level, of different scale, and with different focuses. But certainly we all have the skills and the capacity to contribute to those challenges. Capacity building, that's another area that we certainly are able to do. So at the end, and that's why there are two words there in blue and not in black as the rest. I would say that what I would do is sustainability management from an industrial engineer perspective. Or more than an industrial engineer, I would call myself a social environmental industrial engineer, trying to bring the tools that industrial engineering provides to address social and environmental problems, and contribute in that manner. So sustainable development, and this is related to my area. I come from industrial engineering with a strong scientific background, focused on doing management and sustainability management. And I don't know how familiar you are with all these terms, but I would like to go through them in order for you to understand what I'm talking about when I'm referring to sustainability or sustainable development. Sustainable development is a topic that's been going on for a while, but the most popular, most common definition of it, it's the one from 1987, which speaks about development which meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And that speaks to everything, to things that I do that wouldn't impact others in the future. And that's why we are concerned with, climate change and potential lack of resources, water scarcity, etc., etc. But it's also from an organizational perspective. It also speaks to the future of the same organization. If we as an organization do not take good care of the resources that we use, either technological resources, either human resources or natural resources, the same sustainability or the same survival of our own organizations are at risk. And this is one example that I saw with the mining sector in the northern part of Chile. Because they have access to limited, water is very, very limited in the desert, and that's probably something that you're familiar with. So you have to be very careful with the way you use it. Some of them they were entitled to use all the water that was available, not leaving any for local populations, for tourism, for agriculture, for other industries. So that was one impact. But at the same time, if they were going to use all the water that they were entitled to use, they wouldn't have any future because there wouldn't be any water left for themselves. So that's part of the sustainability at the same time. So this is not just about concern for others, but concern about our own future. And sustainable development or sustainability implies a couple of things. First, implies limits imposed by the state of technology and organizations, on organizations and environment, and by the capacity of the earth to absorb the effects of our activities. And that's part of the things that we've been seeing in Canada in particular this year has been absolutely crazy. The highest temperatures during the summer, wildfires that actually wiped out a township in the West Coast. People certainly died. And now we have floods a couple of weeks ago in the same area. Again, people died. And that's just the effect of our activities through the presentation of different climate, unexpected climates with high storms in a short period of time, heat waves, etc., etc. So the biosphere, the planet, our planet Earth, is not really coping with our own activities, and that's why there are all these meetings, such as the one that we just had in Glasgow a couple of weeks ago, number 26. So we've been discussing this for 26 years with little progress, according to my understanding. Sustainable development also implies economic growth, and that's something that might be a surprise for some. For some, sustainability is just about environmental issues and not necessarily about economic growth. But by definition, sustainable development implies economic growth because that would allow a second dimension of it, which is poverty alleviation. Certainly, we could distribute the wealth that we have in a better manner, but that's a little bit naive at the same time. So having that economic growth will allow a better access and for people to reduce the level of poverty. Obviously, environmental improvement, that's I will say the classical dimension of sustainability when we refer to it, and social equitability. And this is between and within generations. So among ourselves now, today, in the present, and that's why it's important, the discussions such as the discussion that leaders had at Glasgow a couple of weeks ago, or the global discussions that we had among many other things. So equity between, the developed countries and developing countries and the poorest countries, but also within generations. So nowadays, now ourselves towards the future, and how the actions that we conduct nowadays have an impact in future generations in terms of resources, in terms of access to a well-being that some of us are enjoying nowadays. There are several other concepts related to sustainability. I wouldn't stop much on these concepts, but for you to understand, it's related to corporate sustainability at the same time, which speaks to the same dimensions: the economic dimensions, the social dimension, and environmental issues, the relationship of corporations with our stakeholders, etc. It's also related to corporate social responsibility, or CSR, which again has different dimensions. There is a lot of work developed there by Andy Carroll from the 70s. Many papers. So for any of you who would like to understand much more about corporate social responsibility, that's certainly a source that I will invite you to go through. But that again, it speaks to the responsibility, and getting back to one of the aims of your university, the sense of public responsibility and taking care of others for the well-being of ourselves as organizations, as governments, as NGOs, as people in general, in relationship with the environment and the context, including others. Some other concepts related: corporate citizenship, when a corporation demonstrates that it takes into account its role and complete impact on society and the environment, as well as its economic influence. And this is not just about paying taxes or paying or providing jobs or complying with the law. Law and regulations are just some sort of agreement among people. They do not necessarily mean that that's a good standard. It's just an agreement. Therefore, in most places, I will say that corporations, institutions, organizations in general are invited to go beyond what's required, beyond the law. Sometimes between what's legal and what's legitimate, there are important differences. For stakeholders, for communities, a mining company might be entitled legally to operate in a particular place, but that might not be legitimate, valid, morally acceptable or ethically acceptable for local communities who might be losing some of the resources that they need for their subsistence. Therefore, there are differences between what's legal and what's legitimate. Another related concept, it's what was proposed by Michael Porter. That's probably a famous name that you've heard, and Mike Kramer in 2011, which is creating shared value. And creating shared value, it's pretty much very related to CSR with specific actions that they have identified. And that's an interesting paper that, if you're interested, you might have a look if you would like to understand a little bit more about that. Finally, and this is traditional as well, ESG, environmental, social, and governance. That's a concept that's been around for a while. However, I will say that during the last couple of years, the financial sector and some other sectors in particular, but the financial sector has been really trying to wrap their heads around in terms of having these three dimensions being measured in terms of the things that they do, and having some sort of accountability in that respect. And then again, it speaks about the same three dimensions. Similarly, triple bottom line, which speaks to people, planet, and profit. Not just making money, not just profit, but also about people and the planet. That's 3 Ps, or economic prosperity, environmental quality, and social justice. And that's a classical Venn diagram where sustainability is at the center of those three dimensions, where we align the actions of our organizations or our own actions as people, having a good balance between our impact and contributions around those three areas of development. And this leads to a discussion that global leaders had in 2015. Well, before that actually, but it ended in 2015 when they launched the Sustainable Development Goals. I don't know how familiar you are with the Sustainable Development Goals in Iran, but they are all over the place. Initially in 2015, well, these goals were proposed once the Millennium Development Goals, which were much more focused on developing countries, came to an end in 2015. Those goals were not achieved, certainly, in terms of reducing poverty, etc., etc. So a new set of goals had to be proposed by the United Nations, with many organizations supporting that design, business in particular, but also academics, etc., and NGOs. And they came up with this list of 17 sustainable development goals, which are part of Agenda 2030, which aims to reduce or eliminate, I should say, poverty by 2030, which is certainly one of the things that we are not going to achieve, just like many of these goals. However, it's important to have them as a framework and as a pathway to follow, trying to make improvements. All right. So, well, I understand that you've seen them, you know what they are about, and they are trying to tackle many things. And certainly, some societies have much more challenges on some of them, such as reducing poverty or zero hunger. Some others might have issues around education or health or gender equality, which is an issue in many places. Other challenges are related to accessing, having access to clean water and sanitation services, or affordable and clean energy, renewable resources and all that. Decent work and economic growth is certainly an issue for many countries. And these are two dimensions. What is decent work and economic growth at the same time? Sometimes those two dimensions impact each other. Industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and that speaks to technologies, and it's probably much more related to industrial engineers as a first line of action. However, as I have said, all the other dimensions are related as well. Reducing inequalities in general, with the migrant populations, among ourselves, etc. The development of sustainable cities and communities, and that speaks to all the infrastructure that we need to have livable places and livable cities, transport, telecommunications, housing, sanitation, energy, etc., etc. Responsible consumption as consumers, and responsible production as producers. So there has to be a good match there. Certainly, climate change is a challenge everywhere. Marine life and life on land, biodiversity in general. Having peaceful societies with justice and strong institutions, and certainly partnering with others in terms of addressing all these challenges, because none of us alone will be able to address any of these challenges. Thank you for that. Well, just like Dr. Habibi was going through, there is an international study led by Jeffrey Sachs and many others that goes out every year and shows the state of the Sustainable Development Goals per country. And this is the state of the SDGs in Iran. So I can give you the source if you want to go through. If you click any of these icons, you will see the details. As a general picture, red squares means that there are major challenges remaining in Iran, in particular in terms of hunger, in terms of good health and well-being, gender equality, water and sanitation, in decent work and economic growth, reducing inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, life on land, and peace, justice, and strong institutions. The ones in orange are about significant challenges remaining, so still no major, but still significant. That speaks to industry, infrastructure, and innovation, responsible consumption and production, climate change, life below water, and partnering for the goals. And the yellow ones, challenges are still remaining in terms of poverty, energy, poverty and energy. And the one that, just like Dr. Habibi mentioned it, you're doing pretty well is in terms of quality education. So that's great. There are some improvements here in terms of industry, infrastructure, and innovation. That's why you got a green arrow and partnering for the goals. But certainly, you have a lot to do. Like most of us have. Most of us have still a lot to do, and we're certainly as a species, we're not going to achieve them by 2030. But this, as I said, it speaks to a sort of path that we should follow. So that the invitation is for you as industrial engineers to identify some of this and try to contribute to the development and the sustainable development of your country there. So let's move on to my research and how I've been trying to contribute to sustainability in general and some of those particular goals. So my purpose as an academic is to contribute to the academic and practical understanding, assessment, and improvement of organizational strategy towards the sustainability standards of society. And those are my areas of research among some others, because I've been doing many different things with colleagues from Athabasca University and some other organizations. Organizational strategy and the sustainability of cities. That's one of the things that I've been doing, and I will be talking about that in a minute. Multinational enterprises, in particular, their impact in developing countries. Big corporations, which is one particular group of companies that follow a certain certification in terms of their environmental, economic, and social impact. I have also addressed, due to COVID, crisis management, how the financial sector in particular has been addressing COVID as a pandemic in relationship to their stakeholders and their own sustainability. Corporate governance and sustainability for not-for-profits. That's another piece of research that I've been working on lately. And I was just awarded with a grant from the Association of Commonwealth Universities on higher education and sustainability teaching and research. And that's a research in particular that I'm conducting with a colleague from Australia. So we'll do some work there in Australia and here in Canada on those topics. But now I will try to focus on these three pieces of research. And my main research questions are, first of all, why are organizations engaged in sustainability partnerships, sustainability initiatives that get together different organizations? So why these organizations are part of these partnerships? How are they engaged in terms of their organizational structures, and what they have achieved as a gain from engaging in these sustainability initiatives? That's my first research question, and it's the first piece of research that I will go through. The second is around which sustainability challenges are multinational corporations addressing, especially in developing countries. Where are they focused on in the developing world? And what are their contributions to the sustainable development of developing countries? Multinational corporations, as you are probably aware, are much more powerful than many governments. So that means that they have a real power to contribute to the sustainability of society and addressing societal and environmental issues, especially in developing countries that need the support of international organizations. And that's why I'm trying to understand their role there. And the third dimension, if we have time for that, is how is the financial sector responding to the pandemic, and what can they learn towards addressing other crises, for example, climate change or any other crisis in the future? How prepared were they for the pandemic, and how have they related to their stakeholders, and what can they learn from this current experiences still everywhere to address future crises? So 3 research examples. The first is around cross-sector social partners and sustainable cities, which was part of my PhD at the University of Waterloo. The second around multinational enterprises and developing countries sustainability. And the third around the financial sector and COVID-19. So let's talk about the first one. And very briefly, a theoretical background for this. This is around cross-sector social partners and sustainable cities. Cross-sector social partnerships are partnerships where you have many stakeholders from different sectors, the civil society, the public sector, and the private sector all together, trying to collaborate, sometimes around a strategic plan that's designed by them all, trying to contribute to the sustainability of certain cities or communities. And for that, I worked with 4 particular cities around the world. I use the strategic management as some of my areas of literature, in particular, understanding goals or drivers, organizational goals or drivers, their structures, organizational structures, and the outcomes that they achieve as a continuing line where you have goals, you have certain things you want to achieve, you put some things in place as part of those structures in order to achieve those goals, and then at the end, you measure whether you have achieved the goals that led you to put those structures in place. So that's part of the outcomes. I use RBV, or resource-based view, in terms of resources. What are those resources that have driven those organizations to be part of those partnerships? And the traditional business literature and resources literature, we talk about human resources, organizational resources, financial resources, and physical resources. That are the reasons or the main drivers for organizations to join not only partnerships such as sustainability partnerships, but to go into a joint venture, to join others to conduct a particular business project, etc. So we are, in general, and people as well, we are either driven by learning more as a human resource, to collaborate as an organizational resource, to earn more money, to make more business as a financial resource, or to improve the things that we do in terms of our physical processes. But there is also some other pieces of literature that talks about the natural RBV, natural-based resource. That's what I call sustainability resources. So I wanted to include that dimension into the 4 traditional dimensions. And I did that in order to assess the value that organizations gave to their goals or drivers, using those 5 dimensions, and the outcomes. That was for understanding goals and outcomes as part of the first sentence there at the top. And then to understand the structures, I use contingency theory. And basically, contingency theory refers to organizations are open systems that adopt diverse structures according to the context that they face. When contexts are certain, are known, and we know how they might impact our actions or organizations, that's a very known field. So we use formal structures. We do the things that we usually do to address those known environments. However, when things are a bit unsettled and we don't really know what's going to happen, such as with COVID or with sustainability issues in general, any type of organization, a university, a mining company, an oil and gas company, a technological industry, they are not used to dealing with climate change. They are not used to dealing with water scarcity or with floods or with migration crisis. That's not related to the things that they do. So they have to come up with different sort of structural skills in order to address those unknown issues. And that's what contingency theory talks about. So then this project is part of a larger project that aims to help local governments around the world to more effectively implement sustainable community plans, community action plans, and promoting local green economy. And my research in particular around those partnerships was trying to understand the partner organizations around the 3 dimensions that I mentioned. And I've been collaborating with this team of researchers from different universities here in Canada, in the US, and the UK. My questions and my hypothesis were, do organizations implement the structures to partner for local sustainability, and are they vital to the attainment of the strategic goals when engaged in sustainability partnerships? Then the second question was, which resources are more valuable for organizations to join local sustainability partnerships, and as resources achieved thanks to partnering? Third question was, are there significant differences among private, public, and civil society organizations, which we usually think that they are different? And can business in particular, and this is a question in particular focused on the private sector, can business engaged in local sustainability partnerships contribute to global sustainability. And that's particularly because there are more than 10,000 local partnerships. So 10,000 partnerships at different scale addressing local issues all around the world. So if we put them all together, we can come up with a global solution to global sustainability through the engagement of this business, or the multinationals or local business, into local initiatives. My methods, I collected data from 224 organizations from the three sectors, conducting surveys in English, French, Korean, and Spanish, because the four cities were from those different countries. I used mediation models and then some statistical tests there, and qualitative content analysis for the business piece that I just mentioned. I worked with Barcelona in Spain, Bristol in the UK, Gwangju in South Korea, and Montreal here in Canada. They are all similar organizations. I mean, similar cities according to the variables that I have there in the picture. You will have access to the presentation later, so you could go in through all those details. This is a conceptual model where we have the drivers or goals for organizations to join partnerships. Their structural features, organizational structures, and their outcomes, the outcomes that they achieve or were supposed to achieve as part of those actions of joining others for the sustainability of city. I organized these drivers and partners, which are basically the same, into those 5 categories that I mentioned based on RBB, human, organizational, financial, and physical, but also sustainability capital. And this speaks to contributing to the partnership sustainability goals, to environmental challenges, social challenges, economic challenges, community sustainability. Human speaks to gaining knowledge, expertise, sharing experiences, improving competencies. Organizational is about innovation capacity, gaining legitimacy, networking, collaborating with others, etc. Financial is about reducing cost, funding opportunities, making new businesses. And physical is about improving physical resources and improving processes. Structural features, as I mentioned earlier, is divided into 2: formal structural features to address known environments, and informal to address those unknown environments that we are not used to dealing with. So in terms of formal structural features, what do organizations do most of the time? They create new departments, they create positions, they put more money, they put equipment, infrastructure, etc. But when this is informal, they have to create cross-functional teams. They have to put people together from different areas. I work in the engineering department. I don't work in the marketing department. However, to address the challenging areas, I have to bring someone from marketing, someone from sales, someone from, public relations to work with us as engineers in order to address these complex and challenging issues that we as individuals, as engineers in our case, cannot address by ourselves. And that means partnering as well with other organizations, implementing certain policies, plans, reporting, and monitoring and controlling. And that means going back and forth. You implement a plan, you monitor the results. It doesn't work. You have to go back and redesign it again, etc. Much more flexible structures. And then partner outcomes are the same variables that I went through in the first column here as drivers to partner. Some of my findings. First of all, I found that organizations implement structures when partnering for sustainability. So that means, according to literature, that partnering is strategic for organizations, and that has an important implication, because when things are strategic, obviously you put resources. And joining a partnership or partnering with others, it's not just about one of those things that you do because it's a nice thing to do, or because it increases your reputation per se. It's part of the strategy of these organizations. Therefore, these organizations in particular, and that had not been addressed from a quantitative perspective, and that's why I run these statistical models. The literature was always talking about from a qualitative perspective. So they thought, people thought that partnering was strategic, but it tested according to the variables that I had here and with the statistical models that partnering wasn't a strategic dimension for organizations in general. However, the implemented structures did not mediate between the strategic goals, the drivers, what drove them to join these partnerships, and the outcomes. So there was something else around these 3 dimensions, these 3 variables that I had in the model initially: goals, structures implemented to achieve those goals, and the outcomes, which is at the end what we achieved. Even though partnering and implementary structures was strategic, this was not mediating between these two variables. I was not achieving what I was supposed to achieve based on the structures that I was implemented. So therefore, there was something else, and that meant that the partnership was really creating some sort of an environment that was helpful for these organizations to achieve their goals. So it was not just about partnering, but about the partners and the actions happening in collaboration with others. And informal structural features were the most implemented, and that's expected, since these are sustainability challenges. These are not the common things that these organizations will do. These organizations are organizations from many different places. This includes the government, includes NGOs working with migrants and environmental issues, but also includes technological firms, include engineering firms, include companies from the food sector, from the financial sector, etc., etc. Any kind of organization that you will think of. Some of the findings here are that these organizations are basically driven by sustainability, human and organizational resources. That's what drove them to join these partnerships. They were not there to make more money or to improve their physical processes, the things that they were doing. So it was not a traditionally organizational or financial or business perspective, if you will. It was much more a societal and environmental dimension that wanted them to join these initiatives and partner with other organizations from different sectors for years for the sustainability of cities. And that was kind of novel at the same time. Once, because sustainability was not part of the 4 initial dimensions that RBV talked about, but also because these organizations had a real social and environmental commitment to the sustainability of those cities, which is not usually the case, especially from the business sector. These are the results in general for all organizations in this column, but for the private, public, and civil society sectors. As we can see, and the lower the number, the closer to 1 is the most valuable the resource is. So sustainability, human, and organizational resources were the most important for all organizations in terms of what drove them, in terms of the drivers. So what drove them to join were basically sustainability, human, and organizational, and not physical and not financial. What they got at the end of the partnership, after many years of partnering, was again sustainability, human, and organizational resources, not physical, not financial. And they all implemented informal structural features. Those features that were much more flexible, bringing others from other departments, collaborating with different organizations, interacting with others as part of the getting out of their comfort zone somehow in order to achieve and contribute to the sustainability of those societies. In terms of business in particular, and this speaks to the SDGs, I made a connection between what drove this business to join those partnerships, what they got out of those partnerships, and how the drivers and their outcomes could contribute potentially to the global SDGs. This is at the local level, but as I said, there are tens of thousands of partnerships, local partnerships all over the world. So through their local engagement, my assumption is that they could contribute as an overall level to global sustainability. And again, what we see here in the red, green, and blue lines are that they are driven by sustainability, human and organizational resources, and not much by financial and physical resources, which are the gray and orange ones here at the center of the picture. Same with respect to outcomes, what they have achieved, basically human sustainability and organizational resources, and not much physical and financial resources there. So for business, it's the same thing as for organizations from civil society and the public sector. And this is just to show you how I made the connections between one particular driver contributing positively to environmental challenges and a good number of SDGs. They could contribute positively to environmental challenges by reducing the exposure of the most vulnerable and the poorest to environmental disasters and climate-related extreme events. And that speaks to to no poverty, etc., etc. These are all in relationship to the SDGs. You can go through them later on if you wish. At the end, what I propose as a conceptual model is that business drivers and outcomes relate to global sustainability through those local partnerships, in particular through sustainability, human and organizational drivers and outcomes. They can contribute to global sustainability, which represents, in terms of the SDGs and these drivers and outcomes, an opportunity for business to join local sustainability partnerships. So there is an interesting cycle here going on from the local level, multiplied by all those thousands to the global scale. We have published these 3 papers here. This is a brief summary of that piece of research. These 3 papers were published in 2020 and this year, and these are our contributions to those fields. Providing, first of all, a quantitative assessment of strategic engagements. As I said, the logic of partnerships being strategic for organizations was just a qualitative understanding. So we ran some statistical tests there and collected data from those 224 organizations in order to run those quantitative assessments. We expanded RBV to societal or sustainability resources, which is a new dimension, and that's something interesting in terms of an academic contribution there too. And that's a new approach. RBV is a theory of resources that's been around for a while, but hasn't included new trends in terms of what we're going through as society nowadays with respect to all these social and environmental issues. We identified informal structural features as more relevant for a strategic engagement, all this flexibility in terms of how we do things rather than following the traditional approaches. And we connected local sustainability engagement to global sustainability, which is another interesting contribution there, or at least the potentiality of that contribution. Are there any questions there with respect to that piece of research before I move to the second one? No questions. Okay, so let's move to the second one. The second example I'd like to share with you is with respect to multinational enterprises and developing countries, in particular with respect to the sustainability of developing countries. There's been a lot of research in terms of what multinationals do in developed countries that really need the investment and the actions of multinationals. Multinationals have been considered favoring contributing positively to the sustainability of those developing countries by providing jobs, developing infrastructure, bringing new technology, innovation, etc., paying certainly at least a bit of taxes in those places. However, at the same time, they have taken advantage of those resources, sometimes getting out of the country much more than what they are contributing, sometimes impacting their local environments, and not necessarily paying good wages. So there is, I wouldn't say a disagreement, but their actions, the actions of multinationals in developing countries have two phases, like many things, right? A positive dimension that we all agree with, but also some negative areas that do not contribute to the sustainability of those societies, and that's something important to consider. And that's where this piece of research tries to go to. The international business literature identified different sustainability strategies, but shows really little enthusiasm to study the impact of multinationals on sustainability issues, and that's something that's missing from the international business literature perspective. It's much more focused or in between these two actors on international business. That's where it comes from, rather than on the impact of their actions in sustainability issues in developing countries. And business and society scholars in particular have focused on multinationals' influence and footprint, but general management journals have paid little attention to sustainability challenges, are still much more engaged with traditional management issues. They are not focused on the impact of business on health, on education, on inequalities, or developing sustainable infrastructures for that matter. So the purpose of this research is to contribute to the understanding of the sustainability strategies of multinationals and their impacts on the sustainability of developing countries. And that's a research that I have conducted with two colleagues from two other universities here in Canada, Dr. Talbot from Quebec and Dr. Weaver from Waterloo. I'm going dry here, sorry about that. My research question or the hypothesis that I had, well, research questions which were presented as hypotheses in those papers, is which are the strategic goals of multinationals in the context of developing countries, and whether they are sustainability related, whether they have some connection to sustainability issues. How are multinationals structured to address their global and local goals? Because they might be positioned, placed in North America, in Europe, but they are operating in developing countries, so they have a global and a local perspective. And are those structures focused on the achievement of sustainability-related goals? How the sustainability strategies of multinationals from developed countries and emerging countries compare to each other. And emerging countries, I mean multinationals from China, India, Russia, Brazil, the BRICS somehow, but basically China here. And as a secondary piece of research based on that, it's multinational financial enterprises. All the financial sector, the big banks that are operating all over the place. And the specific questions there are which SDGs are multinational financial enterprises focusing on in the developing world? Where have they focused on the developing world? How have they contributed to the SDGs? And the contributions evolved since the SDGs were launched in 2015, and whether there are significant differences between the multinationals from the financial sector from developed countries versus those from emerging countries in terms of their contributions to the SDGs in developing countries. So at the end, it's whether which ones of them are contributing the most or the least. I collected data from sustainability reports from the largest multinationals from these four sectors, these 6 countries, 3 developed countries, 3 emerging economies, in total 58 companies. And the list of companies, it's in one of the papers, so you could see that later on. I use mixed methods. Information, as I said, was collected from sustainability reports using RBB, but then again, using the sustainability dimension as a 5th dimension of RBB, just like in my previous research. Business goals assessed towards sustainability using the SDGs as a sustainability framework. Again, I use formal and informal structures to understand how they were addressing these issues, and I use another significant different test. Some of the findings in terms of global sustainability strategies, the 5 dimensions here: developed multinationals, emerging multinationals. Again, the most important, just like in local partnerships, the most important were societal goals. They were driven by societal issues and organizational issues. Not as much on human, but societal and organizational. That's at the global level. And at the global level, and that's, again, the same thing for multinationals from developed countries and from emerging countries. And in terms of the structures, they both address those issues at the local level in developing countries using informal structural features. So very similar to my findings in terms of contributing to the sustainability of cities. This is contributing to the sustainability of developing countries. In terms of local partners, now in terms of multinationals from developed and emerging economies. This is at the global level. And at the local level, similar results again with a few differences. But at the local level, we have, at least for emerging multinationals, that the financial impact is important. So while a Chinese multinational at a global agenda, it's not really focused on financial issues when they are addressing their sustainability global strategy, but are much more concerned on the societal and organizational perspective when they address the sustainability strategy at the local level. So when that Chinese company goes to a very specific developing country in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, or in Eastern Europe, the financial dimension is important there. So making money, it's important there. What's not relevant are the physical dimensions, nor the human dimensions. And then again, those emerging multinationals follow a much more traditional approach rather than an informal approach in local developing countries. So again, that Chinese multinational, when it operates in a country in Africa, it's concerned about financial returns, and it's following a more traditional approach, which is a difference with the other findings. In terms of the SDGs, they are all addressed somehow, but there are certain priorities. SDG 16 is addressed by multinationals from developed and emerging countries. SDG 16, which is about peace, justice, and strong institutions. So somehow that's an important variable, especially for multinationals from emerging economies, from China in particular, Brazil and India. It's important to develop peaceful, just and strong institutions in those countries. At the end, it's about the context, the institutional infrastructure of the country for them to conduct their business. On the other hand, some of those SDGs which are poorly addressed are zero hunger, SDG 2, is not addressed at all. That's here almost to the zero, to the center of this picture. SDG 5, which is about gender equality. They are not really focusing or trying to contribute to equality among genders. Something similar happens with SDG 10, which is reducing inequalities in general, not just between genders, but in general. Some other they do not address much. It's the development of sustainable cities. Of responsible consumption or responsible production. That means the way that we do as consumers and the things that they would do as producers in those countries. And SDG 14, life below water, so our oceans. They do not really focus on them. Sustainable cities is one of the things that they focus on. That speaks to all the infrastructure that we need to have more livable cities. SDG 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure, which is a common one. Another one that's important, it's good health and well-being. That's one of the things that these multinationals are addressing in developing countries. With respect to the financial sector, multinationals, there has been a decrease since 2017, not necessarily because of COVID. COVID happened in 2020, but as we can see, these multinationals were contributing much more during 2016, especially during 2017, but their contributions went down by a lot in 2018 and then remained low in 2019. In 2020, because of COVID, probably they didn't do much, and nowadays they might be recovering. And that happens across multinationals from the financial sector, from Germany, from the US, but also from China. However, China it's a little bit higher in terms of in 2017, increasing a little bit their contributions. But anyhow, it's concerning that even though the SDGs were launched in 2015, 2016 was a good year for their contributions. 2017 was even better, but then in 2018 everything went down. It's like SDG became another SDG washing, such as greenwashing, and that's concerning with respect to those specific challenges in developing countries. German financial multinationals focus on Africa and Asia, basically. Americans focus on Asia and Latin America, and Chinese focus in Asia and Latin America. Other areas, such as the Caribbean, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, are not really the focus of these multinationals, which are the largest multinationals from the financial sector. So most of the focus have been on these countries throughout the years, 2016, 17, 18, and 19. And that's certainly concerning, especially for not necessarily for these regions of the world, but for other developing regions which are not getting the benefits of these multinationals. And in terms of the SDGs, we see different trends here. Relative more focus on SDG 1, which is about poverty, SDG 4, education, SDG 7, energy, SDG 11, sustainable cities, with special concern again for Africa, Asia, and Latin America. American and Chinese financial multinationals declare contribution to reducing poverty, but they do not focus on Africa, where poverty is really an issue. And German multinationals focus on Africa, but they do not address poverty. So they are not tackling one of the most important sustainability challenges of the African continent. So that's disappointing as well. The least addressed SDG is SDG 9, which is industry, which is kind of weird. The development of industry, infrastructure, and innovation is really important. And peace. Peace is justice and strong institutions, which goes again against my findings from multinationals in general. At the end, I will say that these overall findings are kind of disappointing. They are not addressing the issues that they should be addressing. Their contributions have declined in time. They are not focusing everywhere, which speaks to the lack of success that we're having, and how probably we're not going to achieve what we are supposed to achieve in the next few years. So finishes this second part. Some of the contributions there is the strategic goals, some business structural features to address sustainability, the assessments of multinationals from developed and emerging economies, identify which sustainability goals multinationals focus on the most and least and where, and understanding the contributions of the financial sector to global sustainability. And a couple of papers there that are still under review or R&R. And the third piece of research is the financial sector and COVID in particular. Well, COVID is one of the things that we're still dealing with everywhere, and the financial sector is a key in leading sustainable development. Obviously, they control funds, they invest on other industries that could, contribute to our development, etc., etc. So the role that the financial sector could play, it's key. According to the literature, there are two ways to support the SDGs for the financial sector: by reducing the financial support to whatever might prevent sustainability. For example, the food sector, reducing their investment and financial support to companies that do not produce, healthy food. And that's one of the SDGs. We want healthy people. We don't want sick people, right? Or reducing the financial support to industry that will pollute the environment, etc. And on the other hand, by financial initiatives that will help in the achievement. So it's the other way around: cleaner energies, water and sanitation, the development of infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure, etc., etc. And from a theoretical framework, I use social responsiveness, which is pretty much business strategies to respond to social issues, which classifies business actions according to 4 dimensions. Either they are reactive, defensive, accommodative, or proactive. Reactive is pretty much when you do almost nothing, or you do whatever you do will be totally late according to the things that have happened. And then proactive, on the other hand, is when you're really prepared for the things that are going to happen and you're doing things beforehand, so you're well prepared for that. And that's with respect to COVID in this piece of research. So the aim was to assess the response of the financial sector to the pandemic as a learning opportunity to address future crises. And I've been collaborating with other faculty from other universities here in Canada. Questions: how are Canada's largest banks supporting their stakeholders during the pandemic? What are Canadian credit unions, which is another type of financial institution here in Canada, doing to mitigate the impact of COVID on their stakeholders? And how have Canadian banks adapted their CSR, or corporate social responsibility strategies, to address the pandemic? Some of the methods: data collection from corporations' websites, corporate reports, news articles, press releases, and social media. We use mixed methods: quantitative text mining, sentiment analysis, and social media analytics as well. And some of the findings, and this is very, very briefly. Canadian banks, there are five large Canadian banks that control 90-something% of the market. With respect to their strategic responses to COVID-19, most banks are doing very little to help their stakeholders during the pandemic. 3 out of 10 have just 3 out of 10 have been proactive in terms of their approaches. So that's the best kind of approach in order to address any kind of crisis. And they've been deferring interest, loans, waiving fees, creating protective measures for seniors and healthcare workers, psychological services, and donations. And these are the three groups. So most of them, just three of them are proactive, and most of them have been really late in their response towards their stakeholders. And that's kind of concerning, because stakeholders, they rely on how Canadian banks will contribute to create an environment in terms of financial services for the economy to keep moving, and with the impact that will have on the social issues. For example, Canadian banks responded really well to the 2008, 2009 global financial crisis. So that's something that wasn't really felt here in Canada. However, nowadays, with this crisis, they were not really prepared. And with respect to credit unions, which are cooperatives, so it's private, but it's cooperatives. It's not like the traditional banking service. Canadian credit unions' responses to COVID-19, most of their actions were operational instead of financial. So closing branches earlier rather than creating financial responses to address their stakeholders' needs. Mainly focused on clients first and then on employees, and mostly accommodative strategies, which are somehow in between. Not very proactive, but not offensive either. So they were kind of in between, a little bit better prepared than banks in general. And maybe that's probably due to the nature of credit unions, which are the same clients are the same members, the same owners of those credit unions. So somehow it's a close circle. They are not necessarily concerned for others, as Canadian banks are. Clients are not part of the banks, they're just their clients. Credit unions, the same people, the same members are the same clients. So maybe that's why they were better prepared than banks. But that's an interesting piece, because certainly Canadian banks are much larger than credit unions, and they have a much more recognized place in society. So this speaks the other way around and position credit unions in a better place. Banks' products and services were negatively impacted by the pandemic, suggesting that banks were not prepared for the pandemic. Although the overall sentiment, and that's how they were positioned by the press, was overall positive throughout the first year of the pandemic. This started in March 2020 until March 2021. So this shows a little increase, a little improving trend in terms of how they were perceived, in terms of what they were doing for the stakeholders. Banks stakeholders have been approached differently, highlighting the community over clients and employees. So first of all, banks were concerned about the community, making a lot of donations. The community somehow related to employees. The employees are part of the community. However, the community include many other people who might not be part of, or who might not be employees. So that's kind of a little bit counterintuitive. And then clients were not the priority in this respect. And this just shows the actions are the areas of impacted by the pandemic, and this shows which stakeholders were addressed throughout the pandemic, and that varies. At the end, the community was the one that was most benefited by the actions of banks, at least in Canada. Some contributions here, classifying Canadian banks according to the CSR responses to the crisis, this particular crisis, and understanding the actions and focus taken by Canadian credit unions towards the stakeholders. One of those papers is published already, another accepted, and a third under review. So briefly, and just to finish, some further steps that I would like to pursue in terms of my research and some other things that I'm currently doing is understanding sustainability partnerships institutional context, so the context that set the boundaries and allow these sustainability partnerships to succeed or to fail. Assessing their impact as well. There are many sustainability partnerships all over the world, but the impact is a little bit unknown yet. The sustainability impact of multinationals from emerging countries on emerging economies, multinationals and their impact on climate change, learnings from the COVID pandemic towards climate change strategies, which is one of the things that we are facing and COVID somehow has provided an opportunity to be better prepared for climate change. And this could be an invitation, how to engage industrial engineers in sustainability issues from an educational perspective, but also from a practical perspective in terms of the things that industrial engineers are doing. So thank you very much for your time.